The Apache woman I rescued offered me her daughter as a wife. James had always been drawn to the open spaces of the American Southwest. The endless deserts, jagged cliffs, and narrow canyons called to him like a quiet whisper he could not ignore. As a young traveler, he had walked through forests, crossed rivers, and climbed mountains, but nothing felt quite as alive as the wild lands he now explored. He loved the way the wind swept across the rocks, carrying with it a scent of sagebrush and distant rain. It was both lonely and comforting, a place where one could feel truly free, yet always aware of the dangers hiding in the quiet shadows. One morning, James set out early, the sun just peeking over the horizon. The light glimmered across the rocks in soft gold, and the air was crisp with the freshness of a new day. He carried only a small pack with food, water, and basic supplies, his old leather boots crunching over the gravel. He had been walking for hours, following a narrow path along the edge of a deep canyon, enjoying the silence, when a sudden sound made him stop in his tracks. At first it was faint, almost drowned out by the wind. Then he heard it clearly, a sharp, desperate cry for help. James's heart jumped. He had learned in his travels that danger often came without warning, and help was needed immediately. Without thinking twice, he started moving toward the sound, careful to keep his footing on the loose rocks and steep slopes. As he approached the source, James saw a figure clinging to the edge of a rocky ledge. A woman was trapped, her hand gripping a small outcropping of stone, her face twisted in fear. The rock below her was broken and unstable, evidence of a recent slide. Dust and pebbles tumbled down into the canyon as she struggled to maintain her hold. James froze for a moment, assessing the situation. Every instinct in him screamed that he had to act fast. He shouted, "Hold on." "I'll help you." The woman's eyes widened in recognition, though fear still clouded them. She nodded once, tight-lipped, and tried to steady herself. James carefully edged closer, his own heart pounding. He had faced dangerous situations before, but nothing quite like this. The canyon was deep, the rocks slippery, and one wrong move could mean disaster for both of them. Taking a deep breath, James lowered himself carefully, testing each step before putting his full weight on it. He reached out his hand slowly, calling words of encouragement. "I've got you," he said. "Just grab my hand and don't let go." The woman hesitated, her fingers trembling, but eventually she reached out. James felt the tension in her arm as she clutched his hand, the warmth of her grip trembling through him. He pulled gently but steadily, using all his strength and balance. Slowly, inch by inch, he helped her climb onto more stable ground. Her leg slipped once, and James caught her before she could fall. She gasped, and he held her tightly for a moment, whispering reassurances. "You're safe now, just a little more and we'll be okay." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she scrambled onto solid ground. She sank to her knees, exhausted and trembling, and James immediately knelt beside her. She was bleeding from a deep scratch on her arm, and her clothes were torn. Her face, streaked with dirt and dust, showed a mixture of relief and shock. James reached into his pack for the small first aid kit he always carried. He cleaned her wound carefully, wrapping it with a bandage, and made sure she had water. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She was young, perhaps in her early 20s, with dark hair falling over her shoulders and eyes that seemed both strong and wary. Her name, she told him later, was Nayeli. She was part of a small Apache community living in the canyons nearby. The thought of being alone in the canyon after the rockslide had terrified her, and James's timely help had saved her life. Over the next few hours, James stayed with Nayeli, making sure she could move safely and had no other injuries. He helped her to a safer area, away from the loose rocks, and built a small shelter using branches and a tarp he carried. He gathered some dry wood and made a fire, both to keep warm and to signal that they were not alone in the wilderness. As the flames flickered, he offered her some food from his pack. She ate slowly, her hands shaking, but her gratitude was evident. Nayeli did not speak much at first, but James respected her silence. He knew she must have been frightened and disoriented. He spoke calmly, telling her about the area, sharing stories of his travels, and making small talk to ease the tension. She began to relax slightly, responding with short sentences, and even managed a small, hesitant smile. As evening fell, the canyon grew quiet. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, then deep purple, the stars beginning to appear. James and Nayeli sat by the fire, sharing the silence. He realized that moments like these, born from danger and human connection, were rare and precious. It was not just about saving a life. It was about trust, courage, and the unexpected bonds formed in the face of uncertainty. James learned that Nayeli had been alone because she had been out collecting herbs for her community when the rockslide occurred. She had tried to climb back to the main path, but had slipped. He listened to her story carefully, realizing the strength and resilience required to survive in such a harsh environment. He admired her bravery and quiet determination, seeing in her a spirit that matched the wild landscape around them. The night passed slowly. James kept the fire going and stayed close, knowing that the canyon could be dangerous after dark. Coyotes howled in the distance and the wind whispered through the rocks. He thought about how fragile life could be and how one decision, one act of courage, could change everything. The thought that he had been in the right place at the right time gave him a sense of purpose he had not felt before. By morning, Nayeli's condition had improved. She was able to stand and walk with James's support. He helped her navigate the remaining rough terrain, careful not to rush her. She leaned on him at times, and he realized that the trust between them was growing stronger. She began to speak more freely, telling him about her life in the Apache community, her family, and the traditions she held dear. James listened intently, fascinated by a world so different from his own. As they reached the edge of the canyon where the land leveled out, Nayeli paused. She looked at James with eyes full of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You saved my life. Without you—" Her voice trailed off. James smiled gently. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad I was here when you needed help. That's enough." But Nayeli shook her head. There was a seriousness in her expression that made him pause. "In my people's way," she said slowly, "when someone saves your life, it is not something forgotten. It is remembered forever." James nodded, sensing that her words carried more meaning than he fully understood. By the time they reached her community, James was no longer just a stranger in the canyon. He had become someone who had faced danger for another human being and earned a place in their story. The experience had changed him, making him see the world differently, and it had also begun a connection that would shape the days to come. After the long journey through the rugged canyon, James finally arrived at Nayeli's Apache community. The settlement was small but vibrant, nestled in a hidden valley surrounded by rocky cliffs and shaded by tall trees. Simple dwellings made from wood, clay, and animal hides were arranged in a loose circle, and smoke curled gently from small fires, carrying the scent of cooking meals into the cool morning air. Children ran and played freely, their laughter echoing softly off the rocks, while adults tended to daily chores with quiet efficiency. James felt both awe and respect for the life he saw, a life built carefully in harmony with the land and its challenges. Nayeli led him carefully into the center of the community, her hand lightly resting on his arm. She spoke quietly to the elders, explaining what had happened in the canyon. James noticed their expressions change as they listened, first concern, then relief, and finally something that looked like respect. The elders were older, their faces lined with experience, and their eyes sharp and observant. They had clearly lived many harsh seasons and knew the dangers of the land better than anyone. One of them, a tall man with deep brown eyes and silver streaks in his hair, stepped forward. He looked at James intently. "You saved one of our own," he said slowly. "That is not a small thing. You are welcome here." James nodded, grateful but humble. He had never expected such recognition, and he realized that in this community, deeds carried weight far beyond words. Nayeli smiled faintly at him, and he could see pride in her eyes, though she said nothing. Over the next few days, James began to understand the rhythm of the Apache community. Life here was organized around cooperation, respect, and survival. Each person had a role, and everyone contributed to the well-being of the group. He helped gather firewood, assist in building a new shelter, and even learn to track small animals for food. It was hard work, but James did not mind. Every task he undertook brought him closer to understanding a way of life so different from his own. Nayeli's daughter, Ayana, watched him with quiet curiosity. She was younger than her mother, perhaps around 16, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. At first, she kept her distance, observing James silently as he worked alongside the others. He noticed her glances but did not push for attention. Instead, he focused on earning the trust of the community, knowing that respect was built slowly through action, not words. As the days passed, James found himself drawn to the small moments that revealed the heart of the community. He watched as mothers taught their children how to weave baskets, fathers instructed their sons in hunting and tracking, and elders shared stories by the fire in the evenings. There was a rhythm to their lives, a balance between work and reflection, and James felt a deep admiration for the way they lived with purpose and honor. One afternoon, James joined a group of men on a hunt. They moved silently through the canyon, reading signs in the dirt and listening to the subtle sounds of wildlife. He was amazed at their skill and patience, how they could follow a trail for miles without leaving a trace of their own. When they finally found a small herd of deer, James hesitated, knowing the responsibility that came with taking life. One of the men placed a hand on his shoulder, guiding him gently. "Respect the land," he said simply. "Take only what is needed." James nodded, taking a deep breath before releasing an arrow. It struck true, and the men nodded approvingly. He realized that every action here was guided by thoughtfulness and respect, and he felt honored to learn from them. Meanwhile, Ayanna began to approach James more often. She would watch him as he worked, sometimes offering a word of advice or a helpful gesture. At first, their conversations were brief, almost formal, but gradually she began to share small details of her life. She told him about the plants she collected for medicine, the stories her mother had taught her, and the songs sung during ceremonies. James listened intently, fascinated by her knowledge and the pride she took in her culture. Despite the challenges of adapting to a new way of life, James felt a growing connection to the community. He started to see that their strength came not from weapons or wealth, but from unity, trust, and mutual respect. Every person played a role, every action had meaning, and every choice was guided by the principle of balance with nature. James began to appreciate the lessons he had learned in the canyon, and realized that rescuing Nayeli was just the beginning of a journey far larger than he had imagined. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, painting the valley in shades of orange and red, James found himself sitting by the fire with Nayeli and Ayanna. The warmth of the flames flickered across their faces, casting shadows that danced along the rocks. Nayeli looked at him with a seriousness he had not seen before. "You have done more than save me," she said softly. "You have shown respect for our people. That is rare for someone from outside." James nodded, unsure how to respond. Words felt insufficient, yet he wanted to convey the gratitude and humility he felt. Yana sat quietly beside her mother, listening, and James sensed a growing bond forming in the shared silence. As days turned into a week, James became more comfortable in the community. He learned to cook traditional meals, make tools, and even participate in small ceremonies. The elders shared stories of their ancestors, of the struggles and triumphs that had shaped their people. James listened with fascination, realizing that each story was more than history. It was a guide to living with integrity, courage, and compassion. Through it all, his interactions with Ayanna grew stronger. She began to share her thoughts openly, laughing at his mistakes and offering gentle corrections when he failed to understand a tradition. James admired her intelligence, her quick mind, and her ability to balance respect for her culture with a curiosity about the world beyond the canyon. He realized that she was unlike anyone he had ever met, and he found himself looking forward to the moments they shared. One day, while gathering herbs with Ayanna, James asked her about her dreams. She paused, looking at the distant cliffs and the valley below. "I want to learn everything my mother knows," she said softly, "and I want to see the world beyond these cliffs someday. But I also want to help my people keep our traditions alive." James nodded, impressed by her wisdom. "That is a rare balance," he said, "to honor where you come from and still be curious about what lies ahead." Yana smiled faintly, and for a moment the canyon was filled only with the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. James realized that these quiet moments were just as important as the challenges and adventures he had faced. They were building trust, understanding, and perhaps the beginnings of a deeper connection that neither had expected. By the end of the second week, James felt as if he had become a part of the community. He was no longer just a visitor. He was someone who had earned respect through his actions, someone who had shared hardships and learned to see the world through a new lens. Nayeli would often watch him with a small smile, and James sensed that her gratitude ran deeper than words could express. Iana, too, seemed more comfortable around him. She would laugh at his mistakes, offer advice, and share stories that revealed her inner strength. James found himself thinking about her often, not in a way that distracted him, but in a way that made him appreciate the bond that was forming, built slowly, patiently, through shared experiences and mutual respect. Life in the Apache community continued with its rhythms of work, learning, and reflection. James knew that his time here was teaching him lessons he could never have learned alone. The canyon had tested his courage, the rescue had tested his compassion, and now the community was teaching him patience, humility, and the importance of trust. Each day was an adventure, not because of danger, but because of connection, the slow, meaningful weaving of human lives in the heart of the wilderness. By the time the sun set on the valley each evening, James would often sit quietly, reflecting on how far he had come. From the moment he heard the desperate cry in the canyon, his life had changed in ways he could not have predicted. He had saved a life, earned the respect of an entire community, and begun to form a bond with a young woman whose wisdom and spirit fascinated him. The path ahead was uncertain, but James knew one thing. The canyon, the rescue, and the community had opened a new chapter in his life, one filled with learning, growth, and unexpected connections that would shape his journey forever. Life in the Apache community had grown familiar to James, yet every day brought something new. He had learned the rhythm of the camp, the language of the land, and the delicate balance that guided every decision in the valley. Still, he could not ignore the curiosity and attention of the people around him, especially Nayeli and her daughter, Ayana. Their presence in his thoughts was constant, but James reminded himself to tread carefully. He was a guest in their home, and respect for their ways came before anything else. One evening, the community gathered around the fire, as they often did after the day's work. The sky was deep with twilight, stars beginning to appear in the clear desert night. Smoke rose lazily from small cooking fires, carrying the rich scent of roasted meat and herbs. The elders sat in a circle, their faces lined with age and wisdom, and younger adults and children sat around them. It was a quiet, respectful scene, one that spoke of unity, trust, and shared history. James sat near Nayeli, careful not to draw too much attention to himself. She had been quiet for a while, watching him with a calm, thoughtful expression. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and deliberate. "James," she said, "there is something important I must tell you, something that may not be easy to understand." James looked at her, attentive. "I will listen," he said. He could sense the seriousness in her tone, and he realized that this conversation was significant. Nayeli took a deep breath, her dark eyes reflecting both gratitude and determination. "In our tradition," she began, "when someone saves a life, it is not something we forget. It is honored. The bond formed by that act is strong, lasting. It is more than words. It is a connection that cannot be broken lightly." She paused, measuring each word carefully. James nodded, sensing the weight behind her explanation. She continued, "Because you saved my life, our family wishes to honor you. In our way, this honor is expressed through offering a lifelong bond with my daughter, Ayana. She is young and she has much to learn, but we believe that through this bond, our families will be connected forever." James felt his breath catch. He had anticipated gratitude, perhaps a gesture of thanks, but nothing like this. His mind raced as he tried to process her words. A lifelong bond, offered as a way to honor a life saved. It was profound, and it carried responsibility far beyond anything he had expected. He had never been in a situation like this before. His instincts told him to be cautious, yet he also understood the gravity of the cultural significance behind her proposal. He looked at Nayeli, seeing her sincerity and the quiet determination in her eyes. I don't know what to say," he admitted honestly. "This is a great honor, but I need to understand what it truly means, for me, for her, and for your people." Nayeli nodded. "That is wise. You should not decide in haste. Take time, observe, understand, and learn who Ayana is. The bond is not just a promise. It is a commitment of respect, trust, and care. If you accept, it must come from understanding, not obligation." The following days were filled with contemplation for James. He continued his work in the community, helping with chores, participating in ceremonies, and learning new skills, but now his thoughts were divided. He observed Ayana more closely, noticing the way she moved with quiet confidence, her intelligence in every gesture, and her curiosity about the world beyond the valley. She laughed easily with others, but carried a seriousness in her eyes that spoke of wisdom beyond her years. James realized that understanding her would take patience. He spent time walking with her through the valley, gathering herbs and helping with daily tasks. They exchanged stories, sometimes laughing, sometimes sharing quiet moments of reflection. James discovered that she was thoughtful and observant, capable of insight and empathy that went far beyond her age. Every interaction revealed a new layer of her character, and he began to see that any bond offered through her mother's tradition would require mutual respect, care, and understanding. The elders watched the growing connection between James and Ayanna carefully. They did not intervene, but their quiet presence reminded James that his actions were being observed, that every choice mattered. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing gently on his shoulders. It was not just a matter of his feelings. It was about honoring the traditions of the community and approaching Ayanna with respect. One afternoon, while they were collecting medicinal plants, James asked Ayanna about her perspective on what her mother had said. She paused, considering his question carefully. "My mother is wise," she said softly. "She sees the heart in people. She saw what you did in the canyon. She believes that your character matters, that you can be trusted. But it is not only about tradition, it is about choice. You must decide if you are willing to commit, not because it is expected, but because it is right for both of us." James nodded, appreciating her honesty. It was clear that she understood the weight of the offer, yet she gave him space to make his own decision. This moment of clarity deepened his respect for her, and he realized that the connection he felt was not simply a duty imposed by tradition, but a bond that could grow naturally through understanding and care. As the days passed, James continued to observe and learn. He saw the way Ayanna interacted with her mother, the elders, and the community. He saw her kindness toward the younger children, her curiosity in learning, and her willingness to work hard. He recognized that accepting her mother's offer would be a profound responsibility, not only to Ayanna, but to the entire community. It would require patience, humility, and a willingness to embrace a culture and way of life different from his own. One evening, James sat alone by a small fire outside the community circle, reflecting on his thoughts. The night was quiet, the stars shining brilliantly above. He thought about the canyon, about the fear and relief he had felt while rescuing Nayeli. He thought about the gratitude and trust she had shown, and about Ayanna, whose quiet presence had begun to touch him in ways he could not yet define. The offer of a lifelong bond was no longer just about tradition. It was about human connection, respect, and understanding. The next morning, James approached Ayanna again. They walked along the edge of a small creek, the water sparkling in the sunlight. He spoke carefully, choosing his words. "I want to understand what this means for you," he said. "I want to be certain that any choice I make is right, not just for me, but for you and your family." Ayanna nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That is all I ask," she said. "To take time to see clearly and to act with respect. That is what matters most." In the following days, James spent more time with her, not just in work, but in quiet conversation. They shared stories of their pasts, their hopes, and their dreams. He discovered her humor, her intelligence, and her gentle courage. She asked him questions about the world beyond the valley, and he answered honestly, aware that trust was being built slowly. Their bond grew through shared experience, understanding, and patience. By the end of the week, James realized that his decision would not be based solely on tradition or obligation. It would be based on respect, trust, and a genuine connection with Ayanna. He understood that her mother's offer was a profound honor, but one that required careful thought. He also knew that this moment was about more than himself. It was about honoring the culture, the community, and the people who had welcomed him so openly. James finally approached Nayeli to express his gratitude for her trust. "I am honored by what you have offered," he said. "I see the importance of your tradition, and I want to act with respect. I will take the time to understand and build a connection with Ayanna to ensure that any choice I make is right for all of us." Nayeli's face softened, and she nodded. "That is all I could ask," she said. "Time, understanding, and respect. The bond will only be meaningful if it comes from the heart, not from obligation. I trust you will honor this as you have honored my life." James left the conversation with a sense of clarity and purpose. He understood that this offer, born from gratitude and tradition, was not simply a question of duty. but an opportunity to form a bond built on mutual respect and understanding. He felt a sense of calm and determination, ready to continue learning, growing, and discovering whether this connection could become something lasting. After the serious conversation with Naomi, James realized that understanding Ayana meant more than just working alongside her. He needed to see who she truly was, what her dreams were, and how she viewed the world. For James, the offer from Naomi was no longer just an obligation. It had become a personal journey of learning, respect, and connection. He decided to spend as much time as possible with Ayana, not pushing her or rushing anything, but sharing life together in ways that felt natural. Early the next morning, James found Ayana near a small stream, her hands gathering herbs for the community's stores. She looked up as he approached, her dark eyes curious but cautious. "Good morning," he said softly. "Would you mind if I joined you today?" Ayana tilted her head, a faint smile appearing. "If you are willing to learn, you may," she replied. James knew this was a small but meaningful invitation. He followed her movements closely, observing the delicate plants she picked and the care she took to identify each one correctly. He realized that this was not just about survival. It was about knowledge passed down through generations, a connection to the land, and a responsibility to the community. As they worked, James asked questions, genuinely curious about her life and the community's traditions. Yana answered carefully, explaining not just what each plant was used for, but also the stories behind them. Some plants were used for healing, others for ceremonies, and some were even symbolic of certain values, like courage or patience. James listened attentively, fascinated by the depth of meaning in each small detail. By midday, they had collected a sizable bundle of herbs. Ayana suggested they rest under the shade of a large rock formation. James followed her and they sat quietly for a while, letting the sound of the stream wash over them. Silence was comfortable here. It was not awkward or forced. Finally, James spoke, choosing his words carefully. "You are very knowledgeable," he said. "I have learned more in a few days with you than I ever imagined I could about this land." Yana's eyes brightened slightly. "Knowledge is not just learned," she said. "It is observed, remembered, and shared. The land teaches us if we pay attention. You must be willing to see, not just look." James nodded, realizing the truth in her words. He had always thought he was observing the land, but she reminded him that true understanding came from paying attention with humility and respect. Over the next several days, James continued to spend time with Ayana. They walked through the valley, helping with daily tasks, learning about the plants, the animals, and the seasons. Sometimes they gathered firewood, other times they prepared meals together. Each task, no matter how small, became an opportunity to understand each other better. He noticed her patience, her intelligence, and the quiet strength that seemed to guide her every action. One afternoon, they worked together on repairing one of the community's shelters damaged by a recent windstorm. Ayana handed him tools and explained each step carefully, her instructions clear but gentle. James realized that she was not only skilled but also wise beyond her years, understanding the balance between effort, efficiency, and care. As they worked side by side, laughter occasionally erupted when mistakes were made, softening the intensity of the labor. These moments, filled with shared effort and humor, helped them grow closer in trust and understanding. James also began to learn more about Ayana's thoughts and dreams. During quiet evenings, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories from their pasts. She told him about her childhood, the lessons her mother had taught her, and her hopes for the future. She spoke about her desire to honor her culture while learning about the world beyond the valley. James shared his own stories too, telling her about his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned along the way. Through these conversations, a bond began to form, a connection built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared curiosity. James noticed subtle signs that Ayana was also learning from him. She began to ask questions about the wider world, about people she had never met and places she had never seen. She wanted to understand different perspectives, different ways of life, and James found himself inspired by her curiosity. He realized that this bond was not one-sided. They were teaching each other, growing together in knowledge and experience. The elders observed their growing connection, offering guidance when necessary, but mostly allowing the bond to develop naturally. James understood that every interaction mattered, and he made sure to act with patience and care. He never rushed Ayana or pushed for attention. He respected her space and allowed trust to develop over time. This careful approach helped deepen their relationship and demonstrated his genuine respect for the traditions of the community. As days turned into weeks, James began to feel a strong sense of belonging. He was no longer just a visitor. He was becoming part of the rhythm of the community. The bond with Ayana was evolving, grounded in shared experiences and mutual understanding. He realized that accepting Nayeli's offer would be meaningful only if it was built on trust and respect, not just tradition. This awareness made him more thoughtful, patient, and committed to doing the right thing. One afternoon, while exploring a nearby canyon with Ayana, they came across a small herd of deer. Ayana motioned for James to remain quiet and explained how to move slowly, observe without disturbing, and understand the patterns of wildlife. James followed her instructions carefully, impressed by her skill and knowledge. When one of the deer approached the stream to drink, he felt a quiet thrill, not from hunting, but from the ability to witness life up close and appreciate its rhythm. Ayana smiled at his expression, and they shared a moment of silent understanding, a connection that went beyond words. Evenings were a time for reflection and storytelling. James and Ayana would often sit together by the fire, listening to the elders recount tales of their ancestors, the challenges they had faced, and the lessons they had learned. These stories were more than history. They were guides for living with integrity, courage, and compassion. James realized that being part of this community meant not just survival, but understanding the values that held it together. Ayana, too, absorbed these stories, her eyes shining with curiosity and respect. Through these shared experiences, James began to see Ayana in a new light. She was strong yet gentle, curious yet grounded, intelligent yet humble. He admired her deeply, not just for her knowledge or skill, but for the way she balanced respect for her culture with a desire to explore and understand more. He felt a growing sense of responsibility to honor the trust her mother had placed in him, to approach this bond with sincerity and care. One morning, as they sat gathering herbs, James decided to speak. "Ayana," he said carefully, "I want you to know that I respect you, your mother, and your people. The bond your mother offered is an honor, and I want to understand what it means for you, not just for me. I want any choice I make to come from the heart and to be right for both of us." Ayana looked at him, her eyes steady and thoughtful. "That is all I could ask," she said softly, "to act with respect, to understand, and to choose wisely. The bond is meaningful only if it comes from honesty and care, not obligation. If you are willing to learn, to see who I am, then we can know if it is right." James nodded, feeling a sense of clarity and purpose. He knew that this journey would take time, patience, and effort, but he was ready. He had learned that real connection was built slowly, through shared experience, understanding, and respect. The bond offered by Nayeli was no longer a question of duty. It was a choice he wanted to make with care, guided by honesty, empathy, and genuine admiration for Ayana. As the sun set behind the cliffs, casting the valley in warm golden light, James and Ayana returned to the community. The firelight welcomed them back, and the scent of cooking meals filled the air. James felt a sense of belonging he had never known before, a connection to the land, the people, and the young woman beside him. He realized that this journey, beginning with a rescue in the canyon, had grown into something far larger than he had imagined. A chance to form a bond built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect, one that could last a lifetime. The days passed slowly, each one giving James more clarity about the path he was meant to take. He had spent weeks learning about Ayana, her life, her thoughts, and her world. Through shared work, quiet conversations, and moments of laughter, he had come to understand not only the depth of her character, but also the strength and harmony of the community she belonged to. Every gesture, every word had shown him that the bond offered by Nayeli was not simply a matter of tradition. It was a profound expression of trust, gratitude, and family. One morning, James awoke early to the soft glow of the rising sun. The valley was bathed in golden light, the cliffs casting long shadows across the camp. He walked quietly to the stream where he and Ayana often gathered herbs. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the birds sang in the nearby trees. James's thoughts were calm yet determined. Today, he would speak his heart and make a choice that would shape not only his life, but also the lives of those around him. Ayana arrived shortly after, carrying a small bundle of herbs. She greeted him with a soft smile, her eyes bright and steady. James felt a surge of gratitude and respect for her. She had taught him patience, understanding, and the value of connection. She had also allowed him to see the world through her eyes, revealing a culture, a people, and a way of life that he could never have experienced alone. He spoke first, his voice calm but firm. Iana, over the past weeks, I have learned much about you, your family, and your community. I have come to understand the honor and responsibility behind your mother's offer. I have thought long and hard about what it means to accept this bond, not just as a duty, but as a commitment to respect, trust, and care. And I want you to know that I am ready to make that commitment, not because it is expected, but because it comes from my heart. Yana's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment the world around them seemed to pause. She studied his face, searching for honesty and sincerity, and then she nodded slowly. James, she said softly, I have seen your heart through your actions, your patience, and your care. I have seen that you are willing to understand and respect not just me, but our people, our traditions, and the land that sustains us. If you speak from the heart, then your choice is welcomed. Together they returned to the center of the community, where the elders and Naeli awaited. James approached Naeli first, bowing his head respectfully. I am honored by your trust and by your offer, he said. I accept with full respect and understanding, and with care for Yana, for you, and for your people. I will honor this bond with my actions, not just my words. Naeli's eyes softened, and a smile of genuine pride and relief appeared on her face. She nodded, a quiet strength in her expression. Then it is done, she said. This bond is honored by your sincerity and your heart. May it bring respect, understanding, and unity. The elders stepped forward, their faces serious but approving. They had observed James's integration into the community, his willingness to learn, and his care for Ayana. Their approval signified more than tradition. It was a recognition of character and a blessing for the future. One elder spoke, his voice deep and resonant. This bond is not simply for today. It is for the seasons, for the years, and for the generations to come. May it be guided by trust, respect, and courage. Preparations for a small ceremony began immediately. The community gathered materials, built a fire, and arranged decorations made from flowers, leaves, and woven fibers. The air was filled with anticipation, a quiet excitement that moved through the people like a gentle wave. Children watched curiously, elders guided respectfully, and the adults participated in both practical and ceremonial preparations. James felt a deep sense of gratitude for being included in this sacred moment. When everything was ready, the ceremony began. James and Ayana stood before the community, their hands lightly touching, their eyes meeting with a mix of respect, anticipation, and quiet joy. The elders spoke words of blessing, invoking the spirits of the land, the ancestors, and the community. They recited stories of courage, honor, and loyalty, reminding all present of the importance of connection, responsibility, and respect. James listened carefully, feeling the weight of tradition and the significance of the moment. He looked at Ayana, seeing her strength, intelligence, and wisdom reflected in her eyes. He realized that this bond was not just about him or her. It was about the union of families, the continuity of culture, and the honor of life itself. Every word spoken by the elders reinforced the depth and sacredness of the commitment he was making. Yana spoke softly next, expressing her willingness to accept the bond. I honor you, James, not only for your actions, but for your heart. I accept this bond with respect and care, and I promise to share in understanding, patience, and trust. James felt a warmth spread through him. He spoke next, his voice steady. I honor you, Ayana, for your wisdom, your strength, and your spirit. I accept this bond with humility, care, and respect. I will do my best to honor you, your family, and your people every day of my life. The elders and the community responded with quiet approval and gentle blessings. The ceremony continued with simple rituals, the lighting of the ceremonial fire, the exchange of symbolic gifts, and the sharing of food prepared by the community. Every gesture reinforced the values of respect, connection, and gratitude. James felt a profound sense of belonging, not just to Ayana, but to the community that had welcomed him so openly and without hesitation. After the ceremony, the community gathered around for a celebration. Music filled the air, with soft drumming, singing, and the gentle strumming of traditional instruments. Children ran and laughed, elders smiled and nodded in approval, and adults joined in the communal joy. James and Ayana shared quiet moments amidst the celebration, holding hands and exchanging smiles that spoke more than words ever could. As the sun set, casting warm hues across the valley, James reflected on how far he had come. He thought back to the day he had heard the desperate cries in the canyon, the fear and urgency that had driven him to act, and the trust he had earned from Nayeli and her family. That single act of courage had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. It had led to understanding, connection, and a bond that was meaningful, sacred, and deeply human. Iana stood beside him, her hand in his, and James felt a profound sense of gratitude and responsibility. He realized that life was full of unexpected turns, moments of courage, and opportunities to make a difference. It was not always easy, and it was never predictable, but it was these experiences that shaped character, formed connections, and created meaning. The night passed with laughter, conversation, and quiet reflection. James and Ayana shared their hopes for the future, talking about the seasons ahead, the work they would do together, and the lessons they would continue to learn from the land and the community. They spoke of respect, trust, and understanding, recognizing that these values would guide their bond and ensure it remained strong and meaningful. In the days that followed, James settled into his new life with a sense of purpose and commitment. He continued to work alongside the community, participate in daily tasks, and honor the traditions he had come to respect deeply. Yana remained by his side, not just as a partner in the bond offered by her mother, but as a companion, teacher, and friend. Together, they navigated the rhythms of daily life, learning, growing, and supporting one another. James knew that the bond they had formed was not simply a matter of tradition. It was a choice, a connection built through courage, patience, understanding, and respect. Every day offered opportunities to honor that bond, to act with care, and to strengthen the relationship that had begun in the most unexpected of circumstances. Through this experience, James learned lessons that would stay with him forever: the importance of empathy, the power of trust, and the value of connection. He realized that true courage was not only in facing danger, but in approaching life with an open heart, a willingness to learn, and a respect for others. As he sat by the fire one evening, looking at Iana tending to the herbs they had collected together, James felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. His journey had begun with a rescue, had grown through understanding and patience, and had culminated in a bond that was both sacred and deeply human. The Apache woman he had saved had offered more than gratitude. She had offered trust, tradition, and connection, and James had chosen to honor it fully. The valley was quiet, the stars shining brightly overhead, and the fire crackled softly. James and Ayana sat together, hands intertwined, surrounded by a community that had accepted them and a landscape that had witnessed the unfolding of a remarkable story. It was a beginning, not an end, a life built on courage, respect, and shared experience. Together, they faced the future with hope, understanding, and the quiet joy of having found one another through fate, action, and the bonds of the heart.